Hey folks, welcome. It is the Counter Clipping Show for December 27th, 2021. Hopefully everybody had a pleasant Christmas or equivalent holiday. Mine was okay. A lot of driving, unfortunately, but you know, that's just the way it goes because none of the family live down here in Columbus. So it's all driving up to Akron or Cleveland or thereabouts to get everything done. I do not have a Christmas Wargame loot report because I didn't get any Wargames for Christmas, which is pretty typical for my family because like nobody gets it. I did get a copy of Dune Imperium, which I may do an unboxing video of. If I do, it will be done in the next couple of days. It'll be up in the next couple of days. We will see what happens. I know that Red Flag over Paris is en route from GMT. That should be showing up this week at some point. That was a late P500 pickup, so we'll be talking about that in detail when we do the unboxing of that. In the meantime, we have a channel of the week, which I would encourage you all to go check out. And I'm looking for my planning worksheet that tells me who that is. Curmudgeons with Dice this week. Relatively new channel. Please do check them out. Link in the video description. So I don't know if anybody else is having this problem that I'm having. I'm not having it on this channel. I'm just having it on my other channels, and I don't know what's going on. Where like the entire description is like compactified into one line, and the little show more link is like hidden under the first couple characters of that line. It's kind of a pain, and I don't know what YouTube did or I did or what to make that happen. But if you have problems, just click on the beginning of that line and it should take you to where you're trying to go with the video description. So if I didn't mention it, and I haven't yet, please do give the video a thumbs up if you're going to hang around. I appreciate the support. Don't forget that support includes folks coming and hanging out every week, or just tonight. That's cool too. And if you'd like to do more, then please go ahead and click on the links in the video description for the Patreon, the merch store, and or the Ko-Fi. This is brand new merch store merch, new color on the shirts. So very happy with it. Pretty cool. Did get a couple of t-shirts for Christmas. Ambon Dual t-shirts. They got to get washed before I can not wear them because they smell bad. I don't know what new t-shirt stank is on them, but they smell bad. So we're still clipping SPQR. Although I did not get any war games for Christmas this year, I did get 2 bottles of scotch, of which this is one. This is Oban Little Bay. It's called Little Bay pretty much so they could not get an age statement on it. It's very mass-produced, but I still do like Oban. It's pretty good. This is from the west coast of Scotland. To a lot of people, this is really smoky. The first time I tried regular Oban, which I think I haven't had regular Oban in a long time, okay? Since, like, very early on in my period of time drinking scotch. And I thought it was really, really smoky at the time. This certainly is not really, really smoky. It's tasty. It's fruity. It's clearly aged in some sherry casks. It's also, I'm pretty sure, has some caramel color and is chill filtered as well, which is undesirable, but you get what you can get. And it's much appreciated in any case. Bottled at 43%. No water in this so far. I think I will put a little bit of water in it. Let's see what that does for it. You don't really need much water in something bottled at 43%. I usually, at 40%, which is typical for U.S. spirits, but a little low for Scotch, you may not need to put water in it at all. But nevertheless, I just threw a little bit of water in here to see how it opens up in the glass. So we are clipping, as you can see, still SPQR. Due to Christmas, and we did a lot of holiday prep in the couple days leading up to Christmas, so as a result, I got basically no clipping done since last week, and I got not much else done either that wasn't like directly Christmas related. So the sale video that I would still like to get out around the first week of January is yet unfilmed. So we're still going to work on that. Before we continue, tonight's topic, by the way, is organizing your Wargame collection. And I'll show you another look at the massive dorky spreadsheet that I use to do that. Of course, you also need like a place to put the stuff, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit. So this is pretty good, though. The Oban Little Bay is pretty good, and I like it. So let's say hello tonight from Strelnikov to John Longshore, Strelnikov, E4 Airman, Matt Taylor, Mark McNair, Charles Latora, Mike Anthony, Daniel Silverthorne, Rob Johnson, Manders, Tom Borman, James Whitmer, William Bird, Half-Assed Gaming, Krusty Captain, John Clark, Matt Taylor, I already said hello to, right, yep, it is. Paul O'Farrell, Richard D. Fortuna, Henry Sikorsky, Purple Norseman, Robert Moffat, Matt Davidson, Daniel O'Rourke, Andrew Cook, David Imperato, Rob Johnson, Iggy Cricktal, Fucko, Findle70, Chet Bell, Kilroy was here, John Keyports, Doug Sunseth, Michael Sherman, Kyle Reese, if I didn't get you already, Dicey Odds, Brian Patterson, and that's it so far. What do we got? What's the actual number looking like right now? It was looking pretty good right before we started, unless people got to look at my ugly mug and tuned out immediately, which is plausible. So I think, John, that anybody that drinks a whiskey person, whichever type of whiskey they prefer, will know the difference between all the different types, even if they don't necessarily know a lot about those particular other types that they don't favor. So, Daniel and Sheriff Harry, welcome back to the stream. Of course, organizing this particular game, and we'll talk about organizing inside the war game at some point as well, and we might talk about that tonight too. But I do have a whole video series on tips for organizing inside the war games for counter storage and the like. So check those out if you're interested. And they use specific games as examples, more as templates, more or less, so I could claim them as BGG videos under those games. But don't take that too seriously. Where were these guys? Cretan Slingers. Yeah, there. So we're doing pretty good with 71 concurrence at this exact moment as we claw our way through the Seleucid Heavy Cavalry. I did get a bunch of books, like a lot of books. And I put a picture on social media, and I actually missed a couple of books. I got some Tolkien stuff that was like on a list, stuff I didn't have, which is, believe it or not, there was stuff I didn't have. I didn't have an Unfinished Tales in hardcover, so somebody got me an Unfinished Tales in hardcover, for example. Mine is my old one was just a mass market paperback. The Baron and Luthien volume, I got that. Did I get another Tolkien? I don't think so. I got 3 volumes of Clark Ashton Smith, and I got, I think, 2 or 3 volumes of the Samuel Eliot Morrison Histories of World War II, American Naval Histories of World War II, which is I think I'm only missing about 3 of those now. And I'd like to pick them up before the current edition becomes impossible to get. So, well, lots of people don't put their Robert Moffat. So my intention was to talk about how to keep track of what you got. Now, for some people, right, that's not a problem. If you got 10 war games, who cares, right? You don't need to use a spreadsheet to keep track of that. On the other hand, if you've got, what am I at now? 353 war games, then you might need a spreadsheet to keep track of it or something. Yes, I do label counter trays, and in fact, they're slightly out of reach. I have made fancy baggie cards for the baggies. So this is getting organized in little baggies, the size of baggie that I call heroin baggies that I get from Walmart. And then these bigger baggies that the heroin baggies go into are just snack-sized Ziploc bags. So, I mean, you want to be able to find the stuff that you need to find when the time comes to set the game up, right? Your strategy for organizing counters is going to be different depending on what the game is, how the game is set up, what the scenario, the structure of the scenarios. GCACW is relatively counter light. So you'll notice, actually, that I actually went through my Avalon Hill GCACWs to figure out what was punched, what was unpunched. A bunch of it's unpunched, but a bunch of it's punched. So we might be circling back to those in a near future episode. These are the only chariots I have seen so far today. And they're about the only like real duplicates I have, other than a couple of minor incidental things. But I mean, I prefer to keep the counters. I prefer to keep all of the game stuff in the game box. And unfortunately, that is not possible all the time. I wish it was. So I'm going to show... Stigler, you don't clip your games, so you don't have to worry about it. If you're just playing on Vassal, one of the great advantages of Vassal is you don't have to, not only you don't have to clip the counters, you don't have to punch the counters, and you don't, a lot of times, have to set up the counters. So, nevertheless, I like to clip my counters, and I play a lot more stuff face-to-face than maybe some folks who are only playing Wargames via Vassal. John Clark, no, you do not need the Simple GBOH Battle Manual because you don't need Simple GBOH. If you want Simple GBOH and you like those rules, then yeah, you do need that. You do need the Simple GBOH. You know what? Hold on a second, because that might be different in this current edition of the game. So more recent GBOH products have just included the Simple GBOH stuff in the scenarios, in the games. I don't think that's true here. No, it is not. That's a good question, though. So yeah, I think SPQR specifically, so just looking, let me make sure here, just looking at Kenai as my example. Yeah, there's no Simple GBOH stuff for Kenai, for example, in there. So yes, there is a Vassal module for You're the Rat, I'm pretty sure. Lords of the Middle Sea, I'm not sure about. I'll let Stigler speak to that, because he probably knows off the top of his head, and I don't. So a lot of my games are currently in a... So you're not going to ever see the rest of the room until it's spick and span, and it isn't now. There's room over here for 4 Kallax bookcases that I have yet to erect. And when that happens, the roughly 15 boxes of Wargames parked in that corner will be extracted from the boxes and put on shelves. But we appear to be in no danger of that occurring this week. So, all right, now I know I had there we go, Cappadocian medium infantry. Not everything gets... I strongly prefer trays, but not everything gets trays. I mean, this, for example, if you sort this into the 2 trays that will fit into this box, then what you will have is an impossible mess for setting up any scenario. And I think that's not desirable. That reminds me to check something. I had, by the way, terrible internet all day today, and it seems to be okay right now. So fingers crossed here. Do I count expansions? So for that number I just gave you, the 353, no, I do not count expansions unless they are standalones. So, for example, Blue Cross White Ensign for Flying Colors, I do count because it is a standalone volume, right? And it's in a box. In general, if it's not in a box or if it's not standalone, then it doesn't count in that number. So if, for example, I was counting ASL add-ons, then that number would be at least 20 higher, probably 30. I found like the best place to get the little baggies in various sizes is actually Walmart, and I buy a couple of different sizes from them. But that said, for organizing a large GBOH game like this one, man, I use a lot of baggies. So, yeah, but see, CNA, I'd never have a problem with getting it in a box because it's in a 4-inch box. There's not that much. I mean, it was a lot of stuff at the time, but it's not that much stuff nowadays. I could easily fit 3 trays in that box, and I'm pretty sure I can easily fit all the CNA counters into 3 trays. So as big as CNA is, I don't think that it represents much of a challenge to organize. But part of that is that the box is real big, right? So it's not just that it's... Try to pull this up here. It's not just that it's easy to organize, but it's probably not that easy to organize. But the box is real big, so I think I could probably get almost 4 counter trays in that particular soapbox. So even in War in Europe, I can get 4 GMT trays in that box. The trouble here is, and this is eating a lot of my streaming attention, is there's like a million different units, and I'm just clipping one particular color here. I did this on purpose. So I mean, there are definitely games that the Ziploc, the sandwich bag technique works totally fine. Even actually, something like Paz de Gloria, it doesn't really work that bad. But I'm thinking of something more like Napoleonic Wars or Here I Stand, Ziploc bag. Get all the French stuff, put it in a baggie, hand it to the French player, off you go. Not a problem at all. Because there's not that many different kinds of things, right? And you're mostly, the setup is mostly 2 points here, or 4 points here, or 6 points here, or whatever. So it's not like it's a complicated setup. Now, some games, like say Normandy 44, I will set up Normandy 44 by setup. So I'll have like a couple different compartments for Germans, like Germans east of this line, or Germans west of that line, or Germans in this army group, or whatever. And I'll have the Allies sorted by beaches, or at least in U.S. and Commonwealth, for the landing day, and then I will have everything else in the game sorted by turn of arrival. Put Axis and Allies both in the same compartment. If it shows up on June 10th, it goes in the same box. And I managed to get Normandy 44 into one tray doing that. So... And it's not a tiny game, right? Third Reich is another one, because you kind of have a pool of counters that you build a force pool of as the gameplay happens. And I think a baggie works pretty much fine for Third Reich. Yeah, I think original Third Reich anyway, which is the only one I've successfully organized, is fine in baggies. World at War, You could do the same thing with World at War, but there's a lot more different kinds of counters that are not just force pool units, right? There's a lot of different, weird markers and weird air types and things like that. Now, at some point, I keep meticulous track of games. I do not keep meticulous track of expansions, and as a result, I'm dropping farther and farther behind on the expansions. So, at some point, I keep like losing ASL stuff. I lost a binder of ASL scenarios, for example. I don't know where it went. I have no idea. So we're going to have to figure that out or get replacements or something like that. Now I can't find my Germans or Russians. I've got the starter kit counters, but I can't. There's 2 trays of Germans and 2 trays of Russians. Can't find them. Can find everybody else. Can't find those. So organizing them is, and ASL is like this is why I don't talk too much about how to organize ASL, because I'm like still working on it. It's a huge pain in the ass. It's one reason why ASL players are more like miniature players, even though the game is not like a miniature game. But organizing everything is this kind of meticulous and task that you kind of keep doing, and you're never really done with. Now, my current solution for a World at War is in those Doris bead trays. Those are the same trays that I use for Whiff. So if you want to look at those trays, I think Doris got bought out by somebody, and I think they will be discontinuing that line of trays. Last I was at Michael's, I didn't see any, but I think they're still floating around. Now, the War Europe and the War Pacific, I'm currently using baggies for that too. I'm kind of slowly picking my way through clipping the War Europe, and it's an ongoing project that I'm not particularly close to being done with, since we're not playing it soon. So we should probably have a conversation about the GMT update that hit just before Christmas. Normally when the GMT update comes out, I think I should do a video on that. And I have once or twice done videos on that, but I didn't do a video on it this time because I was too busy. I didn't even occur to me because I was too busy with Christmas stuff. So let's pull that guy up and talk about it, because there's news. Like, if you haven't seen this, big news. So let's go over here and talk about the GMT update. All right, I've got this expanded. Here's GMT1 merchandise. Once again, if you want to read the GMT update, go to the GMT website and read the whole thing verbatim. That's great. I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to talk about the big news. So 2 new P500 games. Infernal Machine, which is a solitaire submarine building game set in the U.S. Civil War. There's already a video for it on the GMT YouTube account. It actually looks, having watched the video, it sounded more interesting after watching the video than it did before watching the video. Let me put it that way. The other one, which we'll look at, I guess right now, why not, is North Africa 41 by Mark Simonich. This has already made its number at 552 after just a few days, at least a couple of which were holiday days. This is not a Zachbond game, but it is a redesign from pretty much the ground up of his earlier game, The Legend Begins. Okay, and looking at the playtest map, it looks like it's I could be wrong, but it looks like a 2-mapper here. So it's a nice North Africa game if you're interested in a not super duper heavy, but nevertheless somewhat groggy Syrian heavy cavalry. I don't think I'm wrong. I have seen this. Then take a look at this, because it looks pretty good. Infernal Machine, I'll pull this up, but this is designed by Jeremy White and Ed Ostermeyer. Jeremy White's got a bunch of good designs under his belt, so this could be really good. I don't know. I haven't pulled the trigger on this, and part of the reason is gun shyness, which we're going to get to here. Here's back of the box for Mr. President, which I haven't ordered, and I don't know that I will, but I've seen it on pictures of it on a table at some event. I think it was the GMT weekend at the warehouse, and it does actually look neat. So I don't have a huge opinion one way or the other on this. I did incidentally I noticed a free print and play solo opponent for Fort Sumter. Actually bought Fort Sumter for a nephew who is into history, and who is not under the idea that you can make a living at it. So, has other career plans. All right, we prepared tonight with actual water here, so that's good. All right. Congrats to Charlie winners. Mark Simonich, Ananda Gupta, Jason Matthews, Trevor Bender, artist Terry Leeds. We've already talked about that at length. Other than mentioning it, the GMT mentioned it. I am not going to mention it anymore. Top fastest growing GMT mods for Tabletop Simulator. Battle Line, Imperial Struggle, Firing the Lake, Stalingrad 42, which is a game I would never play with Tabletop Simulator, but if you want to, go ahead. And Here I Stand, which is another game I would never play with Tabletop Simulator. But again, you go right ahead if that is your preference and if you find that it works for you. Here's some calls for playtesting. Inferno replay articles. They're about 20% or 80% gone on counter trays. If you want counter trays, get them now. New P500 editions, other than the two new ones that we just mentioned, Space Empire's Replicators and Space Empire's Close Encounters, getting new printings as well. Recent P500 editions, including I, Napoleon, has made its number. I haven't ordered that yet, but boy, I should order that. Plantagenet, which I have ordered. Baltic Empire's Bear Trap, Last 3 Yards, Volume 4, which is East Front, which is neat. 18 India, The Bell of Treason, the 1938 Munich Crisis. That might be interesting, too. The British Way is a, 4-in-1 coin box. I'm not gonna really do that. Ken X, first of all, welcome to the stream. If you have sworn that off, maybe take a look at the Dark Sands, because that is maneuver-based, but it's also chit pull, which is generally considered solitaire-friendly. Strelnikov, thanks for stopping by. We'll catch you later. All right, so we've talked about the new P500 stuff. New P500s. Okay. Prequel to one of our top 15 best-selling games. No clue what that might be. Expansion for Commands and Colors. Not shocking. New game from Ralph Shelton. New bot package for one of our coin games. Okay, so that's all cool. Coming events include the War Room at Dice Tower West. We'll be talking about this more. I was asked if I was going to this. My answer was absolutely not. I am reasonably sure that that is still the case. GMT East is April 1st through the 3rd in White Plains, New York. Now, I will mention that, as far as I'm aware, this is still on, but MMP's Winter Offensive, which was going to be MLK weekend in January, has been canceled. I don't know why. They didn't really say why, other than just sort of say they want to make sure all their audience is safe and all that, which all that makes sense, but I don't know if that's their hand was forced by the state of Maryland or by the county or what might have been going on with that. Nor am I inclined to speculate as to specifics of their reasoning, but it's canceled and nobody should be particularly shocked by that. Spring weekend at the warehouse, April 22 to 24, so you can have a quite busy March and April here. Low stock on this Vivictus stuff, which has been the case for a while. Now we're going to get to the printing. Again, if you want to read all this stuff, go ahead and read the update. All right, charging and shipping. Currently charging and shipping. Now all this stuff should, I suspect that most people who have ordered any of these, it's already in the mail or it's about to be. Battle Line, 11th printing, CNC Ancient, 7th printing, Conquest and Consequence, Dominant Species, Red Flag over Paris, Space Corp, Last 100 Yards, Volume 3, Triumph and Tragedy, Triad Struggle Deluxe. Okay. Jeff, as far as I'm aware, nothing else has been canceled lately. I mean, don't be shocked if anything gets canceled at this point, but as far as I know, nothing. Now, the only thing I was on the hook for in this whole batch was Red Flag Over Paris, which I ordered because I suddenly, listening to the Revolutions podcast, got interested in, this Paris Commune thing was actually interesting. So, that game, which uses Mark Herman's Fort Sumter system, will be a good match for my level of interest in the topic. So, however, Judgment Day occurs on Thursday, January 6th, when GMT will charge for Barbarossa Army Group Center, Into the Woods, Pacific War, Plains Indian Wars, Salerno 43, and Vietnam 65 to 75. I am on the hook for all of these, except for Plains Indian Wars, and I guess not the Salerno 43 mounted map. On the theory that I won't be able to fit it in the box, because that's typically the case with these Simonich titles, is if you get the mounted maps, you can't fit them in the box. So yeah, this is going to be an aggressive day. Fortunately, my payday is literally the day before that, so I can handle it, but I am going to whine about it until then. So, and that's a lot of stuff. And this stuff, they plan to start shipping around January 20th. Don't get super bent if they do not make that exact date. All right, is there anything else interesting in here? So this is at sea projected mid-January warehouse arrival. Okay. At the printer, no ship date yet, including Almoravid, CDG Solo System, new printings of Churchill, Empire of the Sun, Red Storm's Baltic Approaches, new printing of U.S. Civil War. U.S. Civil War is great. If anybody hasn't ordered it, feel free to get in on that. Carrion Skirmishers. Which are different. Alright, next up, going to the printer in January, including Fields of Fire, The Bulge, Fall of Saigon for Fire in the Lake, Flashpoint South China Sea, which is a Harold Buchanan joint, and Great Battles of Julius Caesar Deluxe. Now, I am on the hook for Great Battles of Julius Caesar. So it was like one of the ones I couldn't get a hold of for I had gotten rid of it. I owned it back in the day. I got rid of it like a dope, and I shouldn't have done that. And Galatian Light Cavalry. I had a hard time finding it. And then when I got it again, I'm like, man, these counters are like wafer thin. Like almost TSWW wafer thin. All right, in final art, next get a print slot, CNC Ancients expansion number 5, whichever one that is. Charioteer, Mr. President, Norway 1940 expansion, or for PQ17. I don't have that on order, but I'm probably going to put that on order because I'm interested in that, and I actually feel like PQ17 is a bit underappreciated. So that may be something that we order. Paths of Glory Deluxe. I'm at the point where my Paths of Glory is like several editions out of date now. So, incidentally, I emailed HMS. They did not respond. So, I mean, nobody should be surprised by that. But I did email. Their website's still there. They're nominally still taking orders. I asked them about product availability, and they did not respond. So, again, no one is surprised here. But an effort was made. I should have set these up before starting the stream, really. But we're almost done with this particular color, so. So yeah, so Jeff and I were conversing in the comments about that, about my in my inside the box video on Wavell's War, and it is listed as an HMS product, but apparently Mill Creek did all the actual work, and HMS just basically sold some of the copies. So at that point. They didn't do any of the actual work. They published 2 issues of the magazine, as far as I'm aware, and that's it. Even if you look at BGG, their name is only on 4 products, one of which is Wavell's War. I have been waiting basically forever for a couple of these January 6th titles. So, and then we're not going to go through nearing art department readiness because that stuff might be 2 years away yet. I don't really see anything new here. Thank you for the shout out, GMT. Who's this? Patrick Rail. Maybe we'll need to look at this. Okay, sure. We'll let's add one of these for further for review later on, and go back over here. I was actually trying to do video on Europa Universalis4 earlier today, and it just didn't work out. OBS was not cooperating for some reason. The hotkeys would not consistently work, so it was very hard for me to have to tab out of it, go over and hit stop stream or start record or start record. So we won't be seeing, and I face planted in the game anyway because I suck at that game. So, and I haven't touched it in years. So, all right, catching up with the chat. Iggy Kricktal asks about recent NWS news. I am unaware of any additional news that we have not already discussed. So for those who don't know, Christopher Dean, owner-operator of NWS Wargame store, passed away what felt like very suddenly. And it definitely looks as though nobody else had access to any of that stuff. Either the website or the emails or any of it. So there has been there are third-hand reports of conversations backstage that somebody might have had with somebody about somebody continuing the operation. But I think I have yet to see any corroboration of that, and I think it is a misinterpretation of Dean's business partner on the digital side for Rule the Waves, saying that the digital side was going to continue under another storefront at some point once everything gets figured out. And I'm sure that's true. I mean, I'm sure that's the intention, but I have no information about any continuation on the board wargame side, and I am operating under the assumption that there will be no such continuation. So now there is going to be a Marty Sample, thanks for stopping by. There is going to be a probate thing, and that can go fast, but it can take a long time. I don't know how complicated it's going to be. It might be super duper complicated. It might be relatively straightforward. Nobody knows. But the fact is that I can't find a statement by anybody that's like in that position that says, yes, once everything is cleared up, we will be continuing and resuming operations or whatever. No one is saying that anywhere that I have seen. So, and that was the case before. So, now if I didn't mention it, the Gray Rooster, we did a Gray Rooster deal, and that turned out really well. So they will be... Marty, yes, you are absolutely right. But there isn't even anybody saying, hey, once everything gets straight. I mean, like I said, there's been no statements by anybody. Somebody who maybe the son might have mailed some packages that might have been stuck in somebody's car. I certainly did not receive any such package, and I don't know of anybody who has said that they did. I'm willing to be, I'll propagate that news if that's the case, in which case some folks might want to hang on, but I wouldn't count on it. I wouldn't count on getting your stuff. if I were you. All right. So, we got more yellow guys. There are absolutely avenues to play war games. You know, if you're legitimately that remote, you can absolutely use Vassal. But if you're not, then chances are pretty good there's some kind of infrastructure somewhere. Even if that is, you know, looking for opponents on some of the looking for opponents groups. All right. Iggy Kricktal said he received packages from NWS from the end of November, because that would have been right before he passed, which was very early December, as I recall. Chim812, first of all, welcome to the stream. Secondly, Hollow Legions, I can confirm that Hollow Legions is shipping now. So, anybody who has pre-ordered it will get it, you know, you should get a shipping notification soonish. The exact timing, I don't know. I don't remember how many pre-orders there were. But it was quite a few, as I recall. Hollow Legions has been out of print for quite a while. So, the desert stuff has been out of print for quite a while. So, John Sy says Christopher Dean passed on December 1st. Now, I haven't seen... Did anybody see an obituary? Like an actual obituary and not, you know, a Facebook post? I'd be curious to see that. But if, you know, you can't... Nobody can put links in the chat, so you can't link it in the chat. If you want to email it to me at ardwulfslair@gmail.com, that's fine. I have seen that at least a couple of people have gotten their Hollow Legions. Mike Anthony says if he has first edition Hollow Legions, is there any reason to get this new version? Okay, so there's new counters, which are easier to read than the old counters, and are frankly nicer counters in every other respect as well. There's a large number of additional scenarios. There's updated desert rules. There's a campaign, a historical mini game called Soldiers of the Negus, which is Italians in East Africa, I believe, which might be interesting. So there's quite a bit of additional stuff in it. So yeah, I would say if you haven't gotten a Hollow, I mean, I kind of feel like even if I had the last printing of Hollow Legions, which I think was by MMP, I would still want this one. Wasn't there a... I could be thinking of Critigar or something else, or Doom Battalions or something. I thought that MMP did a print of Hollow Legions, and I don't know when that was, though, so... So, getting any out-of-print ASL product costs a bunch of money, so... Unless there's no changes or really minor changes, I think it's probably worth your while to grab the new one. I have a copy coming. Is 172 the... so here's your alternative, is wait to order it from Ritter Krieg, which will offer it at a discount, or wait till Grey Rooster gets it in, which will offer it at a bigger discount. That's your alternative if you're going to balk at the price. Well, Perfidious Albion, the desert material was originally included in the British module, but I think for the reason that they wanted to keep working on it, because the desert stuff is not that popular. It was held off, and they said we're going to put it in with the Italian module whenever we release that. So my Hollow Legions is a first edition. Well, I don't know about first edition, but it's the Avalon Hill Hollow Legion, so it's super duper old. All right, let's see what we can do here with all of these damn counters. I think we're going to be okay here. Oh, wait, here's more skirmishers. Oh, dear. What a mess. John Longshore says that ASL is where OCD people meet the junction of heaven and hell. I can't say that's wrong. So, to be honest. Heavy cavalry. We'll put it there. That's fine. Now, what the rules update amount to, I suspect, is not that much. Because ASL's rules are pretty stable, to be honest. I anticipate no major rules changes. And soonish, we should see an update to the digital rulebook, which I have yet to buy, and which I'm definitely not buying in January for obvious reasons. I do need it, and I want to get it. It's just the timing hasn't been there. Chris A., thank you for subscribing to the channel and for telling me that that function is actually still working. So that's cool. So yeah, Vassal started as virtual ASL. Like the ASL Vassal, whatever it's even called, has kind of turned into its own thing. So you're kind of downloading a separate package, as I recall. I have never even tried to do ASL online, so. And I'm not sure I will, because I don't need to, because there's ASL players around here. So in the case of the shelves behind me, I will generally group by, I will sort them by publisher group, generally speaking. So what I mean by publisher group is I will, for example, put Avalon Hill and Victory games together because they're in the same size boxes. GMT gets kind of, and this is really driven by box size rather than anything else. Even the shelves behind me, that's really driven by what I'm noodling with at the moment. You'll have noticed over the course of the last couple of months when I've had this rig behind me that the game selection has changed somewhat, and I realize you're not really getting a great look at it. That sucks. Huh. Guess I don't need to turn that on, huh? I thought that was really cool. It totally doesn't show up here. Of course, that's not really what those are for, so there's that, but didn't realize it wasn't showing. So, inside publisher, I will sort by chronologic period. There are places in which sorting chronologically breaks because of box format. Example, although in that sense, the IKEA Kallax bookcases are actually pretty forgiving because you can slide something like the Goss games, in there on their sides, where normally I would put those games flat as they're stored behind me right now. And that's because the Kallax bookcases are like a full foot deep. 13 inches, actually. Yeah, Stigler, I agree. I disagree. I think there should be a small set of standardized commands, including things like flip counter and rotate counter and stuff like that. I think those should be standardized. You can't standardize everything, but I think there should be a common set of standard commands that are standard throughout all Vassal modules. Thank you, John. I will check that out. I'll tell you what, I didn't know Christopher Dean was that young. That is shocking at that age. I mean, it's, if with the personal tragedy involved, I mean, you can't say it's completely surprising, but boy, that's not much older than me. That is 2 years older than me. I mean, Tom, that may be the case, that they were designed specifically for war games and albums. They're very popular among general board game people as well. It's not just war games, but definitely they're very nice. Now they are deep though, and that is it doesn't say anything. I am unaware of it being COVID related. Let me put it that way. There's nothing here that says it was COVID related either. Not that it wasn't, but I mean, nobody has that information. And there's not really that much info in the obituary either. Now I guess there is a standard wargame box, right? The bookshelf box or bookcase box or whatever we want to call it, that in a variety of different specific configurations was popularized by Avalon Hill, I think. But then again, 3M was doing it, I think, before Avalon Hill picked it up. So popularized by Avalon Hill may be correct, but I'm not sure invented by Avalon Hill is correct. A lot of this Numidian stuff is all light infantry and light cavalry, which is not surprising. Stuka Joe, thanks for coming by. Yeah, I mean, I had some orders too that had been lingering around for more months than that, and I got a refund through my credit card company, so. At this point, unless you've gotten something already, I would not make an assumption that you're going to get it. So, Roger Hemsath, I'm going to go with that unless you correct me. Welcome to the stream. John Keyports is 26. Oh my God, he's a wee sprout. It is typical that at age 50, I'm often the youngest wargamer in the room. Not always, but a lot of times. I mean, I've talked to a bunch of people that emailed me or messaged me in various places after the death of Christopher Dean was announced, saying, hey, here's my story, you know, what do you think I should do? And I told them the same thing I said on the stream. You know, I would estimate that there are, at minimum, several $1,000s of orders were left hanging, and the true number may be an order of magnitude larger than that. So, yeah, get your Buckeye card. The golden Buckeye card here in Ohio is something you get at age 60, I think, or something like that. You get like discounts at McDonald's and things like that. So, not quite yet. So, here's the other thing, though. I often tell people, if you're interested in ASL and you have like ASL people around, don't buy anything. Go play with the people who have all the stuff. I can't. You literally can't get all the stuff. Let's say, you know, I wanted to play A Bridge Too Far. Well, A Bridge Too Far goes for $800. I can't get that. So, I'm not getting that. So, I think in general, the etiquette is that if you are playing a game on Vassal, at least one of the people playing should have the game. That is how it would work if it was a face-to-face game. I see no reason to assume anything different playing on Vassal. So, and I'm personally willing to cut people a little bit of slack on that for games that are out of print and only available for very high prices on the secondary market. So, that's all. John Carter, that's all the heroin. So I use, as we may have established already repeatedly, an Excel spreadsheet to keep track of war games. So let's take a look at that. So as you can see, I think I'm not filtering right now, and I keep noodling with this topic discussion. There was also a box column at one point so that I could tell which numbered box it was in. And as things come in, I add them to the list. And sometimes I forget to say, hey, this came in on this date. So I couldn't tell you right now what date Panzer's Last Stand showed up at. That was the thing that I had on order with NWS, and I ordered it directly from MMP after that happened. So, eventually I'll fill in all the blanks with unknowns. So I guess we'll put unknown. If I wasn't there at the time, I'm putting unknown. I have a state to say, well, hey, this is when these things are unpunched, but I also am not updating that as I punch games, so that's maybe not something that is super duper useful. I have a sell or keep column, so most of the stuff here is keep. Things that are listed as sheddable mean that they're free to be traded, or gotten rid of in some way or another. I think I'm keeping Tito and Panzer Battles, actually, thinking about it. No sense getting rid of old SPI games or S&T games at this point. And of course, I could put the price paid too, but did I add Wavell's War to this? No, I didn't. All right, so Wavell's War. We're calling this HMS GRD. And I didn't note when it came in, so it just goes in as unknown. So I forget. But it's pretty straightforward. And then I've got a bunch of other... I got some... I may only have one graph at this exact moment. This is currently games by publisher. And I think it's accurate, except that HMSGRD is not going to get counted in other because of the way I do the tabulation. So this is, an interesting... Let's zoom out just a hair here. Interesting and fun thing to look at. And I'll occasionally run this and post it on Twitter or something like that. So GMT was actually real close to 50% of my games library at one point. Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. Welcome, Mo. Expect your credit card company to ask questions about have you tried to contact them, blah, 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 when was the last time you tried to contact them, that kind of thing. But I can verify that they're not answering emails or Facebook messages or any of that. So at one point, Avalon Hill was a really thin slice. That's no longer the case. At one point, SPI was an even thinner slice. That's no longer the case. And while these aren't huge slices of the collection, they're, 6% is not too bad. And that's, so you can mouse over and get the value. So games from GMT, 94. Oh my God. MMP. Now, MMP I think gets shortchanged the worst out of this because there's like a huge number of products that are just all lumped into ASL. Now, I have a lot of other MMP stuff that's not ASL, but everything for ASL is an expansion, basically, except the core rules and maybe Beyond Valor. But I lump it in two lines: ASL and ASL Starter Kit, and that's it. Even though the starter kits are standalones. So, Hollandspiel's grown. I picked up a bunch of Hollandspiel stuff. White Dog grew. Clash of Arms grew a little bit. I've got 4 or 5 things. Well, Clash of Arms is 7. Okay, about 7. I'm not sure that MMP is the biggest pile, but I know that I'm losing about 30 products from MMP by not counting them all individually. On the other hand, the single game that takes up the most amount of space by a ton is ASL, right? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 shelves over here that is ASL. So maybe it is the biggest pile, actually. That's actually pretty plausible. What do I have from Avalanche Press? 2. I can only think of 1, though. Nope, I take it back. So the 2 are Imperium Third Millennium, which is not great. And the... and Red Russia, which is a Russian Civil War game. So, Revolution Games number 9. Most of that is blind. Not all, but a lot of that's blind sword stuff. Oh, here's Skirmishers. I hadn't seen Skirmishers before. All right, we're organized now. Total counter clipped. At that one point, there was... So, Marty, there are a few non-war games in this list. So if we go by... Oh, what did I call those? I think if it's a historical game, it's pretty much in this list. Is Shores of Tripoli a Euro? Yeah, but there's... I don't have a problem saying that some Euros are war games. I think Rebellion 1775 or whatever it's called. I think that's a Euro, but that's also a war game, or close enough that I don't care. So if I have the abstract, assorted, Euro, or mixed. So this is what I call not quite war games. So Battle Line, War of Wizards, which is an old M.A.R. Barker title from TSR. Legion of Honor, which is that narrative Napoleonic career game from Clash of Arms, which looks really neat, which I haven't played yet. Source of the Nile, Belter, Striker, Striker 2, Search for Planet X, which is totally not a war game. 1835, totally not a war game. Kremlin, it's historically themed, but not a war game. This Guilty Land, I don't think it's a war game. It's not about a war. It's about what happens before the war. 4X, not a war game. That's definitely a Euro-ish type of thing, although it is a hard game to categorize. And Blackbeard, which I just picked up. I don't own Undaunted, so I can't place it. But yeah, if the question is Undaunted a war game? Yeah, it's a war game. It's even a hex and counter war game because it's got hexes and counters, although its hexes are not hexagonal. That is a semantic point. However, Stellar Horizons has very little fighting in it. Let me put it that way. Not none, but it's got very little fighting in it. And with that in mind, it's easy to consider it not a war game. However, it is designed like a war game in that it is sort of a simulator, right? It's an attempt to simulate, and I think Stellar Horizons is an attempt to simulate. So I don't think it's a war game, but it feels slightly wargamey. I don't want to say it feels slightly wargamey in the same sense as Twilight Struggle, right? Because it's not historical, and it's got, like I said, got very little fighting in it. But no, I wouldn't consider it a war game. It definitely has some war game DNA. Let me put it that way. I don't agree. I do not own U-Boat, I have to tell you. And I don't agree with Marty that Undaunted is lousy. I think Undaunted's a pretty cool game. It's not for me, and presumably it's not for Marty either. It's just outside of my bailiwick as a wargamer. But I think it's a nice introductory game. It looks nice. It's well designed, and all that. Ye Old Geezer Gamer got the wife to try Terraforming Mars. I've played Terraforming. I don't own Terraforming Mars because it's one of those I don't need to own it because it gets played every week at cabs type of things. So there's no need for me to own it. Pull up our stupid machine, the stupid YouTube machine today. So apparently most of the space junk in orbit right now is are after effects of two specific incidents. There was a satellite collision, and which I don't remember the specifics of, and there was a Chinese anti-satellite weapons test that resulted in most of the debris that's in orbit right now. I mean, if you're going into Undaunted with the assumption that you're actually going to be playing Case Blue, then you are going to be very disappointed. So, but you went in with bad assumptions, so, I mean, what can I say? You were going to be disappointed. You should have asked me about that. Now, Terraforming Mars is not a war game at all. Terraforming Mars is a 100% straight sci-fi themed Euro, but it's a good game. I mean, there's been a number of other games. Avalon Hill had games with hexagonal counters as well. Not sure I can name. Did Empires in Arms didn't? I don't think so. But I'm pretty sure. I remember that something did. I forget what. SPI did a few non-war. Avalon Hill did a lot of non-war games. Okay, like a lot. SPI did a few non-war games. There are a couple of obvious examples. Scrimmage being one. I'm not sure that SPI actually published Up Against the Wall Motherfucker. Which was an early Dunnigan design about some protests that happened in the late 60s at Columbia University. I'm not sure that SPI published that, but I'm also unsure that, well, I think BGG lists that as being the case, and I'm not sure BGG is correct there. I'm willing to be corrected on that. Maybe they did a version. It seems like the kind of thing that maybe SPI wouldn't do. So Dallas was from SPI. SPI did several role-playing games. They did, they did a bunch of the sci-fi stuff that showed up in Ares magazine and a few oddball fantasy things, almost all of which you could call war games. But they also did Universe and Dragon Quest, and Dragon Quest is actually a pretty good game, I think. No Retreat North Africa. Yeah, I think the No Retreat games in general have hexagonal counters. I'm not sure if North Africa did, because that's the one that I never had, but the Italian Front game did. Now, I think there's, I'm as centered on war games as you find, generally speaking. But there are some war games that I like. I will occasionally play Terraforming Mars. Like I said, I didn't go buy it because I don't need to. I do own and have played and enjoy quite a bit Lords of Waterdeep from Wizards. That's pretty good. The Plot to Assassinate Hitler is not a war game, but it's designed kind of like a war game. Jeff Beeler says SPI's Canadian Civil War is not a war game. And, I've never really looked closely at that. Maybe he's right. Is a game like Prelude to Rebellion, is that a war game? I mean, I'd say no. And I don't think that's a controversial statement. We've gotten into what's a war game, which is a topic that I'm insufficiently interested in to get upset about it. Let me put it that way. So Doug, I think there was a point. Doug says that he would characterize nearly all RPGs as skirmish war games. There definitely was a time in which that was absolutely an accurate idea. When nearly all war games or RPGs were also skirmish war games. That is way less true now than it used to be. A lot of the popular war games kind of still are, but a lot of the indie RPGs are definitely not that. I couldn't get one that said that, so it's also it also plugs into USB, but it's way too far away from the computer to do that, so I'd have to rig up some kind of cord, and that would be way more work than we'll be doing this evening. Elric was published by Avalon Hill. Trying to remember if Chaosium did it first. I think they might have. Without looking that up, they may have been the original publisher of Elric. Now, if we're talking about the Elric board game, right, there was also an RPG called Elric, which was a one of the editions of the Stormbringer RPG. Jeff Beeler, no, the Pandemic games are not war games. Well, if you're talking about like volume of players, then yes, I agree, Doug, that the majority of games are still combat simulators. But again, if you sit down at a random assortment of tables at Indie RPG Night up at Origins or Gen Con, the games that you are going to see largely are not that. There's a few that still are, but largely they won't be that, with exceptions like Dungeon World and stuff like that. So Avalon Hill also did Dragon Pass, which was the Glorantha board game, which was definitely published first by Chaosium. And that's why I'm getting it. So Pandemic Rome supposedly has war. Nah, I'm not buying it. Not buying it. Yeah, even the Pandemic Rome, which won a Origins Award as like best historical game, which was kind of the intended for war games category. I'm not buying it. I've played Pandemic, and Pandemic's good. I'm not in a rush to play it again, but they're not. I don't think they're war games. And I think the reason for that is not thematic. I think the reason for that is that they do not attempt to simulate. And a war game attempts to simulate. Blackbeard is closer to a war game than the Pandemic games are, because it attempts to simulate. Admittedly, it's pirates and not a war, but Gene Billingsley is a game company. Gene can say whatever he wants, but Gene runs a company that publishes what sells, right? And if they sell a lot of games that aren't war games, good for them. I mean, as long as they keep publishing war games, and that load in January certainly looks war gamey to me. Yeah, Tony, I think at the point of backgammon or chess, I think the abstraction level, it's well nominally I think there's truth in that. I think the abstraction level has become so great that it is very difficult to tie war simulation to those games. Go, same thing. Well, if anybody's played Pandemic Rome, then I'm going to defer to your opinion on it, because I haven't, and I am not probably going to anytime soon. So, not that I wouldn't necessarily, but it's not on my list of things to do. Yeah, I don't think you're right, Doug. I honestly I don't think you're right. I think you're maybe underestimating the number of indie RPGs that have been published in the last 10 or 15 or 20 years. And then again, maybe the difference we're having is exactly where we're drawing that line too, as to what constitutes substantial combat mechanics. John Carter says that chess is a war game with a poor combat system. Yeah, that's kind of true. All right, how are we doing this? These will go in here. Skirmishers will go in with the skirmishers, which is here. I'm just throwing everything in a tray for now, because otherwise it's going to sit around forever. I think we're about done, having done about a sheet of counters. I think we're about done clipping for tonight. And it's about 9:20, so I usually don't actually clip the entire time. Rome might be the best Pandemic. I don't know, but I don't really care too much either. Now, again, not that Pandemic is a bad game. I've played the original Pandemic, and I thought it was pretty good. But not, so again, we're talking about stuff I'm not at a genre level all that into. That is not to indicate that there's anything wrong with it, with those things. Well, is a one-on-one combat game that's literally nothing but combat, one-on-one, like Gladiator, or Gunslinger for that matter, are those war games? I'd say yes, but I think there's probably people who will argue with that. Because they're conflict simulations, right? But the conflict is like one dude on one dude. It's not a war, right? But this is in fact the problem in these kinds of arguments is what are exactly the criteria? And then when you start listing your criteria, you're going to find that there are games that you absolutely think are war games that won't fit your criteria. So oh, Chim812 just found his Rise and Decline of the Third Reich. Still a good game, by the way. I think that game holds up really well. Even though there's like new versions of it that try to occupy the same space while adding a lot of stuff to it. John Sy, I would like to try Black Orchestra. I have not actually done so. I keep trying to find it at a convention like Origins, and it keeps not being available. I mean, you could create somebody, I'm sure, has created a CRT for chess. So, Jeff, there is a way in which that is true of Triad Struggle as well. If nuclear war breaks out, everybody loses. Or you lost if you broke out nuclear war. Whoops. We're sticking with the Oban tonight. Why is it a skirmish, a war game? This is the problem. Is the definition? It's an impossible definition to pin down. In a narrow sense, it is impossible to come up with a set of criteria that even the person that came up with the criteria is going to find games that don't fit the criteria but which they nevertheless think are war games, and games that do fit the criteria but which they think are not war games. It is impossible to define. So, the answer that I arrived at quite a while ago is to be broad in my definition of what's a war game and what's. This is why I am not going to try and argue that something like Twilight Struggle is not a war game. Let alone Undaunted, which is a straight hex and counter game. So, let's add a little bit of water to this. Yeah, Doug, I mean, it's exactly. I mean, does it have to be a declared war? If it's not a declared war, then in that case, coin games are obviously war games, right? Because those are all about non-conventional conflicts or insurgent conflicts. And yet there's plenty of people who argue that it's not. They're not war games. I played History of the World a couple of years ago and walked away from the table thinking, that was pretty good, but boy, it took way too long. So, and that's true of a lot of the old Avalon Hill games. John Sy, if you're talking about the Star Wars Queen's Gambit, yes, and it's worth a bundle of money. I sneered at it when it came out. Boy, that was dumb. It's worth a bunch of money now. If it's card-driven game, it's not a war game. Well, what about Empire of the Sun? You know, nobody argues that Empire of the Sun. But then you're, if you say, oh, but Empire of the Sun is a war game, but these strict rules all still apply, and it's just an exception. Well, then you have an exception-driven definition, and your definition is got holes in it, right? So, yeah. So, Doug, I agree with. I think that's the definition that we all actually have, whether we will admit it or not. Is I know a war game when I see it, and if you disagree, cool, but I don't care. So, yeah, Empires in Arms didn't have hex counters. 5th edition supplement Strixhaven. Yeah, I don't know what that even is, so. Perfidious Albion says, what about the real-life cat and mouse encounters between U.S. Navy and Soviet subs during the Cold War? Are those really war games or bluff calling? I mean, I'd call them war games. Like I said, I think the definition needs to be inclusive because it is impossible, because a non-inclusive definition of war games based on whatever criteria just doesn't going to work. Oh, okay. So, but John now clarifies based on the Netflix series, The Queen's Gambit, which I really liked, by the way. I thought it was very good. I think I'm also I'm going to agree with Stuka Joe here that I like historical games, and not all of those ended up in shooting wars. It doesn't take a shooting war for the game to be interesting, necessarily. And sometimes the combat is super duper abstract, like Civilization, right? It's like I move into a space, when we each lose a piece, and whoever had the most pieces wins, right? So. And that's it. But it's a very brilliant design, though. I hasten to add, Civilization is a really brilliant design. It forces you to expand due to population pressure, or else you're just throwing the excess population away. I'm not familiar with Wallenstein. I've heard the name, but. But there's games that are going to be you're going to find a game that doesn't centralize combat as its play mode that you still think is a war game. You're going to. I don't know what that's going to be, but I think you will. This stuff's real easy to drink, by the way. And while it's a little smoky, it's not. I don't think it's very smoky. Then again, the other thing I got for Christmas is Lafroig, so that's going to be smoky. Which is the quarter cask, which I think I've tried, but it's been a while. Let me put it that way. So it looks like we topped out at about 120, but we're still at 110 right now. So you never know what's going to happen here. Shogun, or whatever the hell it's called now. If we're talking about the Avalon Hill, okay, the Hasbro Game Master, or Milton Bradley Game Master series Shogun, that later got rebranded as Samurai Swords and later got rebranded as something else. That's a really good game. That was my favorite of all of those games. It's basically Fancy Risk. I mean, in Japan with like some extra doodads, but it's a pretty good game. And you're going to argue that that's not a war game? I don't think so. I wouldn't. Chuck Turner, welcome back to the stream. Let me remind everybody, not that Chuck brought this to mind particularly, but please do give the video a thumbs up. Please do subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. And if you'd like to help support the channel, please do check out the links in the video description to the Patreon, the merch store, and the Ko-Fi. The hoodies are out of stock again. I'm like, really? Spring? Can you like not supply hoodies? And I'm guessing that the secret is that they're coming from China. and they can't actually get them. Is 1989 a war game? I mean, there's a conflict there, right? There's people rioting in the streets, right? So, Marty likes Twilight 1989 better than Twilight Struggle, apparently. I did not have that reaction, although I wouldn't object to trying 1989 again at some point. I did not like it. But I might like it better on a second try. Yeah, I don't know what that even is, Andrew. That sounds non-wargamey to me. Two Minutes to Midnight is... Whether you think 2 Minutes to Midnight is a war game or not, it's going to be... It's the same answer you're going to have with Twilight Struggle, I think. Even Richard Berg made that an optional rule. Stigler, I will hasten to add. I'm not sure I remember that there being a David Hasselhoff card, but I mean, you're right. I'm not sure I can top that. Europe in Turmoil is another build up to World War I type of variant. What keeps me away from Europe in Turmoil, I've heard good things about it, but what keeps me away from it is this kind of abstract freedom versus authoritarianism conflict that is driving that, and I don't think those are accurate reflections of the geopolitics of the period, of the build up to World War I period. So you could sell those unpunched counters for several $100s. Half-Ass Gaming, is there an issue with the Normandy 44 Vassal module? Because I've played about half a game of Normandy 44 on that Vassal module and didn't run into any problems. But that doesn't mean there aren't any. Yeah, I mean, the crunch level, there's some Euros that are considered super duper complicated, I know, and I don't know anything about those. If you are interested in heavy Euros, check out the Heavy Cardboard channel, which I assume you're all aware of since he has roughly 10 or 20 times more subscribers than I do. So... I only know it was optional because I've looked at the rules. Certainly the buzz around the pasta rule never bothered to mention that it was optional. Jeff Beeler says that he tells his FLGS that GMT games are handmade by California elves, and that's why they're so expensive. I find that a totally baffling statement. I mean, I don't think GMT games are particularly expensive. I mean, if you're gonna, look at the most expensive GMT games, then they're all enormous games. So that's why. It's not that they're GMT, it's that they're enormous. That's why they're expensive. What was it? Red Flag Over Paris was like, what, $38 or something like that? I think that was the P500 price, but still, it's not going to be... Oh, okay, the Disaster at D-Day thing. Yeah, I'm not sure I remember that it did, but it's been a while since I looked at it. Edward on Heavy Cardboard does do some war games, but it's not a usual thing, necessarily. Ugh. Good call on the water. Carl says they don't have elves, but they have halflings that like to surf. I mean, and what Mo's saying here is totally right. When you look at if you look at it in terms of investing in hours of play enjoyment, then war games are totally worth it. So, Well, yeah, I mean, GMT has the best prices, and I think for a couple of reasons. One, they're printing in China. Not everybody is. Two, they're printing in noticeably higher volumes than everybody else, and that's probably the bigger factor. Um, so, I mean, the only so the guard tower. If I go to the guard tower, they'll have about 20 or 30 war games on the shelf. I think closer to 20. About 16 of those will be GMT. One or two will be Compass. One or two will be DVG. And I'm like not counting like our Access and Allies and stuff like that, which I would call a war game. It's a bad war game, but it's a war game. I'm not counting that because those are like huge. That's orders of magnitude more copies of those are sold. You can get yes. So just so this is clear, Death Valley is tremendous value for the money, and any of those big GMT multi packs are. If you look at the Battles of the American Revolution, the Guilford Saratoga Brandywine tri-pack, the Men of Iron tri-pack, the Death Valley, huge SPQR, Great Battles of Alexander, huge value in those games, huge. Well, there's totally systems that are exactly what you describe. It is a game system that you can simulate any battle you want in, at least within a particular period. The thing is that those tend to be miniatures games. Why? I think there are Hex Encounter equivalents to that, but I think not very many. And I am going to say, for similar reasons that Stigler says about Prestag's Master Pack, I think it's the same thing. I think it's going to be dull. I think in making it generic, I think you're making it dull. But on the other hand, we have an adjacent situation in war games where you have a game system that has many individual specific situations in various games, right? GBOH and OCS or whatever. And that's not that dissimilar a situation, but the assumption is not that you're just going to build the situation yourself, right? If you're doing that, then you're kind of assuming a genericity that is, I think, going to suck all the flavor and fun out of it. And Death Valley's getting an expansion, that's true. So Mike Anthony's offering a semantic point here on the logistics game. So, I mean, I guess that's true. I'm not your CNA expert, so I'll let CNA experts argue that. Into the Woods does look good, and I'm very excited to see that. Certainly there's going to be no shortage of unboxing videos in January. So there was also that Ancients, was it 3W or Decision? I want to say it was Decision, but it might have been 3W. Did like an Ancients box that has, it's like a little 1-inch box. It's got a counter sheet with like 60 counters on it, and it's like got like 80 battles in the box. And that's the kind of thing I'm picturing, is that you're kind of smoothing it down to such an extent that you're losing all the texture of the individual battles. Or if you like, you're turning it all into table battles. Brian Melville, $40 P5. Is it really that cheap? $40? That even sounds cheap to me. Well, in this case, I decide which games go on which shelf by the size of the shelf. These middle shelves right here, you'll notice that only Avalon Hill games or games in identically sized boxes fit on those shelves upright. The only other games I have that are not Avalon Hill or Victory games that are like that are a couple of the older OSG games. My Napoleon at Bay, for example, is in a precisely Avalon Hill-sized box. Peter Berg says that the hard part of open-ended gaming is not necessarily the rules, it's determining the correct order of battle and organizational management structure used by the conflicting forces at the point of... Yeah, that's true. But in a Hex Encounter game, the designer is giving you that. If you got to do your own order of battle research, then, I mean, again, there's people that do this, because there's people that do this for miniatures. But I suspect that we're talking about a different hobby then, right? And I suspect that the generic nature of such a rule set lends itself to miniatures rule sets. So I challenge you, Hethwill, and I know there are examples, to find more than a handful of different battles where you could just pull a book off the shelf and get a decent order of battle out of that book. Because good order of battle information requires fairly specialized sources. There are some authors, like George Nafziger, who does include extensive order of battle information in their books. Most do not. So if anybody's interested, Alan Salazar mentions the Kriegspiel that Let's Play History did. If anybody's interested in that, go check out the Kriegspiel forums in the Armchair Dragoons website. There are constantly Kriegspiels being run out of that. American Civil War is pretty easy to do order of battle research from, frankly, because you can get up to a certain point, you can get OB information off of Wikipedia. I mean, if you look at the Wikipedia order of battle for Gettysburg, for example, it's pretty good, down to the regiment level. If you want lower than that, then you gotta do your own research. But for most World War II operational topics, the order of, including Normandy, the order of battle on the Wikipedia pages is not adequate. In ASL, you can do DYO scenarios in ASL, but ASL doesn't scale up that well, right? I mean, if you're talking about, it's a squad-based game, so you can realistically depict company-level actions in ASL pretty easily. But if you get much bigger than that, then you're going to start running into situations where the game's really, really big. Not that you can't do it, but it doesn't scale up that well up to the battalion level. And if you think about how many squads are in a battalion, I'm not doing the math for that in my head, by the way, but it's a lot, and we're not doing, I think that's a lot. So if you get, three, based on the rule of 3, you'd have 3 squads in a platoon, so 9 squads in a company. That's a comfortable ASL scenario. And then you get 27 squads in a battalion. That's a quite large scenario. You get a couple of battalions there, up to, say, a regiment or brigade, and then you start getting into, boy, this is a big scenario that's going to take us 50 hours to play. Many American Civil War battles have pretty good order of battle information on Wikipedia down to the regimental level. I can vouch for Antietam and Gettysburg specifically because I've transcribed those onto counters at various points. Now, if you want to validate that order of battle information from Wikipedia, then, and I think you should if you're designing a professional product on it, then you do need to dig deeper than that. And Stigler mentions, too, that there's a lot of variability in the quality of source material. That's true particularly for a lot of Western battles that aren't as well documented. or as well covered or as popular, if you like. And yes, Peter Bergs mentions that order battle is not the only thing that you need. You need to know you need analysis of the terrain. I mean, just finding that is not necessarily a trivial task, depending on the exact topic. Now, can you hand wave it? Yeah, you can, and some board wargame designers certainly do that as well. But a really solid game won't do that, right? Hethwell does mention those volumes of Mediterranean Air War, and those are an example of really good books for doing that kind of research. That is absolutely right. David Glantz found all kinds of stuff, including some huge battles that were like never mentioned in the literature prior to that, because the German commanders that were the basis of Western Allied historiography after the war never mentioned them. Oops. Stigler mentions that the battlefield at Seven Pines is now Richmond International Airport. So, I mean, there's period maps of most of the Eastern Theater that you could rely on for your terrain analysis. But if you're actually going to go there, then you're hosed. Yeah, but John Carter mentions an order battle for War of the Ring. But you can make that up, right? And as long as you're consistent with the book, then nobody's going to argue with you. A lot of the rises on the Gettysburg battlefield are not as tall as you might think, judging from looking at wargame maps as well. Stigler mentions, and you know, if we're going to talk in detail about doing the research for war games, then I'm going to have people who actually know what they're talking about on to talk about that, and not me. But Stigler is, of course, right that the order of battle is just the list of forces and doesn't necessarily include who arrived when. So Gettysburg, of course, famously, you know, it kind of starts with Buford and Heath tangling up on the road, and then over the course of 3 days, more and more troops pour into that battlefield. Who arrives when is a major factor in a battle like that. That's also true of a number of other Civil War battles offhand, and any immediate engagement, really, which is what Gettysburg is. It does make Gettysburg games really easy to set up. There's usually, even in a big Gettysburg game, there's usually only a handful of counters. Hethwell, I don't know that anybody's arguing with you that that's not a cool idea. I think we're only mentioning that those do exist, and that there are some people that like them. I think they do lend themselves better to miniatures rules than to hex and counter rules. But the other thing is that miniatures games, and maybe we could this is another one that's like, man, if I'm going to talk about miniatures games, I'm going to have some miniatures people on here to talk about it, because I played 40K 25 years ago, it was cool. I mean, I can't really offer tons of deep insights on miniatures games, and honestly, if you're looking for super deep insights, I'm not 100% sure you've come to the right place. But miniatures revolve around the tactical level, right? So if you want a game like GCACW that's an operational game, well, miniatures games are not really designed for that, right? And I'm aware that there are examples of non-tactical miniatures rules, but they're kind of few and far between as far as I'm concerned. So at some point, we need. At some point, I want to get back to some point, like real soon. I want to get back to. I want to get back to GCACW, playing GCACW. That is, but I'm gonna buck hard. I think we're gonna probably wrap up our Europa game in the next few weeks. I'm gonna buck hard to do Pacific War next after that. Jason LaRiviere asks, Clark Ashton Smith or Lovecraft? I mean, Lovecraft more popular, definitely. I think Clark Ashton's hands down the better writer of the two. It's not close. I love Clark Ashton Smith. I think he was a marvelous writer. I mean, we're in a sense we're in a hobby that's all about the what ifs, right? We are playing out alternate versions of the battles that we're simulating, and in another sense, we want historicity, right? So it's a balance that needs to be needs to be found in any particular game, in any particular designer, and in any particular player. You're looking at your Tai Bamba situation. Patrick, thank you very much. Yeah, I should talk to you, seriously. Not that there's not other folks floating around to do GCACW with. I mean, I lost my train of thought there. It's probably the scotch. So there's a video, I think, on YouTube about pronunciations of the Civil War names that you aren't pronounced like you think they are. So Allies have not taken Tripoli yet. And the Africa Corps is basically there, just kind of waiting on supplies. Some of those World War I battlefields are still chewed up. We did finish watching Wheel of Time. There's a lot of problems with it, but there's no game-breaking mistake occurred that ruins the series, in my opinion. Everything that I think they did questionably on could be recovered from in season 2. Season 1 apparently had a lot of problems they had a big COVID delay. One of the actors bolted. They filmed the last 2 episodes many months after the preceding 6 episodes. So there was a whole bunch of problems in that season 1 that I hope they don't run into in season 2, which is already filming. So I liked it. I mean, it was good. I think the cast is real good. In some of the scenes are really strong. Some of the episodes are really strong. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. If you want a fantasy, type of series, check it out. But you could see it got the budget got real constricted in those last 2 episodes too, and you can really tell. Now, what I have seen, as Hethwell mentions here, what I have seen is what he's talking about for Flames of War, I've actually seen for 40K and Fantasy, actually, where you have like this strategic level game that or operational maybe, that you're playing, and then you do the actual battles with miniatures on a board. And that's true, but in every case, the strategic part of the game is in fact a board game. Whether you're using a literal board or not. So I mean, and hey, maybe there's a market space for that generic design any battle you want to do type of thing in the hex encounter space. You could get I think a good article out of the American Civil War battles and the different names between North and South. A lot of the battles have different names between North and South. Interestingly, some of them don't. Like Gettysburg, everybody says it's the Battle of Gettysburg. Perfidious Albion, yeah, no, we're talking about like Harry Heath is Harry Heath, and is it Broken Bro, for him, and a bunch of those other names are pronounced maybe not as you would think they would be if those were names you'd see today. I didn't really have that problem with the Trollocs, actually. They don't look awesome, but I didn't think they looked hideously. Well, they kind of were hideous, but that was the point. I didn't think they looked that terrible. Let me put it that way. Best overall history of U.S. Civil War from the military point of view. I don't know what John Keegan gets wrong, but I haven't read John Keegan's book on that. If you want one volume, I would go with James McPherson's Battle Cry of Freedom, but he spends a ton of time up front talking about the political and social causes of the Civil War, and maybe if you just want the military history of it, I'd probably point you to Shelby Foote, to be honest, who it doesn't ignore, but really glosses over the non-military aspects of the Civil War, and does a really good job creating a narrative history of the military side of the conflict. If you want the military side of the conflict, then Shelby Foote is a good place to go. Recognize that Foote was not a historian. He was a novelist that happened to write this extended... And I'm not saying that his trilogy is a novel or that it's fiction, historical fiction. It's not. But it's written like a novel would be written. It's written as a narrative. That's why it's called The Civil War, a narrative. So don't interpret it as this is what a professional historian thinks. Interpret it as this is the narrative of the Civil War, and it's a great narrative. It's very well written. And then if you are specifically interested in delving into the historical bases of that narrative, then go look at other books later on. The West Point Atlas does have some really good Civil War maps volumes. So, yeah, McPherson is a bit dry. I will actually agree with that. The book's good, but it's a little dry. Well, that's another thing, is that the U.S. Civil War is really easy to find books on, right? You want to find books about... Go to any bookstore, any commercial bookstore in the United States, with the exception of specialized military history bookstores, and try to find a book on the 7 Years' War of Frederick the Great, okay? Not an obscure topic. You will probably not find anything. Can you get that stuff on Amazon? Yes, you can. Can you get it from a specialized bookseller? Yes, you can. But generally speaking, it's much harder to find. The Civil War is different. I can go to half-price books, and there's like 3 bays of Civil War books, right? So even World War II has a comparable amount, but maybe a little less. Huge amount of stuff. And all the source material is in English, so you don't have to worry about, well, these Soviet archives opened up in 1994, and they had all this interesting information that we didn't have until then. You don't have to worry about that with the Civil War. Now, some of that information has been lost, but still, it's very well documented. So... All right, we are about out of time, so let's talk about what's happening this week. Game tomorrow, but I also go back to work tomorrow, so I don't know that we're going to have anything scheduled before. I'll have an unboxing video on Thursday. We'll be streaming with Dan at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Dan's channel. No idea what the topic will be. We'll probably figure that out right before we start the stream, if it works anything like it did last time. So, actually, no, I think we had a topic last time, but I also had Ryan Howman lined up to be on it. So, but yeah. So we'll be coming back. This will be the last stream of 2021. I didn't mention that until now. So last year, 2021. So we will see each other next on January 3rd. We'll start my new position at the same place, same thing I was doing, on January 3rd as well. Otherwise, I'm going to see all of you folks next week, and everybody have a happy and very safe New Year. Please be responsible, whatever it is that you're doing that day. Please be responsible about it. All right? Everybody have a